Well, Andrew, while I have you on the live mic, you want to explain the rules for today?
Well, so this is a little laid back compared to past podcasts. There's no legitimate like draft order we have to decide, and there's no you're not listing anything. We are looking at the NBA 75 that came out last week, and obviously, as you know, John did a full NBA 75, our longest Patreon show to date. And we said when the list comes out, we'll do a reaction to the list with our biggest snubs, our biggest surprises, but more specifically, our biggest undeserved nominations to that list. And then I want to get these two to look at your top 15 that you mentioned, and they can tell you where they agree, where they disagree. They can look at your list and say where they agree or disagree. So it'll be divided really into thirds, where the first third is the snubs, the second third is the undeserved nominees, and the last third is them reacting to your list.
So I'm going to start off by, rather than picking randomly who should go first here, I'm going to start off by asking either of you, do either of you have a snub in mind that you feel viscerally, passionately, in your core should have made this top 75 list that did not?
Yes.
Okay.
Klay Thompson.
Well, you said it okay. So, Yash, you start us off, and then I'm going to save my take. So, Klay Thompson is a name that, it's funny. Not that I paid that much attention to the conversation surrounding this thing after the final day of the list drop. I don't feel like there was that much angst about the fact that Klay Thompson didn't make it. Obviously, there was the video that got circulated about what his teammates did to rib him, as it were, in the locker room. Talk to me about Klay Thompson. He is really number one for you of everybody that didn't make it?
He is absolutely number one for me.
Why?
I stand hard for Klay. I always have. The Warriors won 67 games, won a championship, and then they won 73 games. And he was undoubtedly the second best player on that team. And nobody else from those Warriors teams made the list. I mean, you had Curry, and then Draymond Green didn't make the list, as he shouldn't have. And look, but for a Draymond Green sex crime on the court, they would have won 2 rings. Klay, look, he's one of the 3 greatest shooters ever. He's an elite defender. He was the ideal complement to Steph. He would be the ideal complement to just about any superstar ball dominant scorer. He had a run in the OKC series that changed the trajectory of the NBA by getting Durant to go to the Thunder, which arguably won the Warriors 2 more rings. And he did it by putting on a stretch of shooting that maybe 1 or 2 other players in the history of the sport could have done. Reggie Miller's on this list, deservedly. You know what? In my opinion, Klay Thompson's a better player than Reggie Miller. Klay actually played defense. Klay allowed Curry to be hidden a little bit on defense. He didn't need the ball in his hand all the time to be this lethal, dominant force as an offensive player. And that's highly underrated in team building. I think guys like AI and maybe even Melo could have won a ring with a teammate like Klay Thompson. He's just in so many ways.
In so many ways. What? Finish up.
He's just a perfect second banana for.
So that's the thing. You just nailed the reason. Look, I had Klay as I believe it was my 74th entrant on my list. I thought he had a really good argument for making it. I also thought his argument for making it was similar to the guy that I have as my biggest snub, which I'll say for a minute. But when you're saying if those other guys had Klay next to them, they could have won a championship. That, I think, is the reason why Klay Thompson is not on this list, because with the exception of, and someone jump in if I'm missing somebody, Dennis Rodman, I don't believe there was anybody else on this list that was very clearly if you gave this guy their own team, there was probably a ceiling to what that team was going to do. I think everybody
there's plenty.
Ray Allen.
Paul Pierce. What did Paul Pierce ever accomplish before Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen got there?
He got to a conference finals.
congratulations. I mean,
okay, but so here's the thing. Again, we've never seen Klay Thompson in a role where he had to like generate offense for his team because that's not what that's not what his game is. His game is he plays off of other guys. And there are other guys on this list who certainly have played off better players. James Worthy, Robert Parrish.
James Worthy is another guy.
Kevin McHale.
He's very much.
Sure. Kevin McHale. There are guys that go back further. Like I didn't watch Hal Greer play alongside Wilt Chamberlain, but I would imagine that Hal Greer benefited greatly from playing alongside the likes of Wilt Chamberlain. Like there are other guys, but I guess it's very specific to Klay because we've watched him and like the greatest compliment that one of the greatest compliments that has been given to him is he scored, 60 points and he took, 7 dribbles, whatever that crazy stat was, right? Like that's also, it's not a demerit, but it's like, he's not an alpha. Like that's not his thing. I'm not saying that's a reason he shouldn't make 75. He was on my list. Again, he was on my list. For that to be the guy that you're like, this is the most egregious is
okay. But like, you know who else wasn't very clearly an alpha was Scottie Pippen. Where's he on the list? Like
Scottie Pippen was third or fourth in what was he in MVP voting in 93, 94 when he led the Bulls to the second round of the playoffs?
Yeah. And that's all they only got to the second round of the playoffs with him as their best player. I mean, look, like we never saw Klay without Steph.
We don't know.
But what we do know is as a second banana, they didn't just win a championship. They were one of the best title winners ever. I mean, you win 67 games and you win a championship. That's a pretty great team. And then the very next year they win 73 games. And your third best player is Draymond Green, who's now like, is Draymond Green going to even be a Hall of Famer? Probably not.
Yes, I guess.
Of course he is. You're kidding?
It's a basketball Hall of Fame. Come on.
I mean, I think
actually, Yash, look, I agree he should be on. He would clearly make my top 75. Here's the problem. The running mate he has is the perfect running mate to make his life as easy as possible.
Bingo.
Who else could give Klay more space than Steph Curry? There's literally nobody else in NBA history that could give him the sort of opportunities he's had. I'm with you. I would take him over Ray Allen straight up if we're picking our shooters as this goes. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to talk about the most egregious snubs on the list, there are reasons to dock Klay. And I think the biggest one is that Steph is uniquely suited to make him great.
Can I
a lot of shrapnel here towards Ray Allen, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. Andrew, what was that?
Can I say something toward Yash's point? Look at what Steph's team did last year when he had this like almost identical to the same season that he had in 2015-16, where the numbers are comparable. He misses the playoffs.
Draymond forgot how to shoot.
Okay, put Klay next to him, and they're a 73-win team. Like Draymond Green, being an above-average shooter for one season is not going to make the Warriors of last year a 73-win team. I think go back to not just Yash, but Klay's argument. The way he measures greatness is like, look how many games that mattered, moments that mattered that I was a part of. And you guys are looking at regular season accomplishments, whereas I measure greatness differently.
And exactly, Andrew. For as much as Klay was obviously helped by Steph was also obviously helped by Klay.
Yes, that's why Klay should be on the list. That's why he should be on the list.
Yeah, it just the reason that it and yet look, you're making very logical reasons for why maybe somebody else deserves to be considered a bigger snub. It's just watching this era of basketball and seeing Klay come up big time and time and time and time again in so many key moments. He feels like a guy that you can't really tell the story of this era of the NBA without talking about Klay Thompson. He deserves to be on that list.
So I'm actually going to pivot and I'm going to say mine now because I want to hear why you put Klay Thompson ahead of Tony Parker, because Klay Thompson went to five finals, right? And just lose count just now. If he went to 5 finals, he won 3 rings. One of them was, and by the way, the undisputedly the second best player on those teams. Like, I agree.
Where are you going with this? Where are you going with this?
I agree. He was better than Draymond Green on the 73-win team and the team that preceded that won the championship. But like, this isn't like Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant. This is not that. This is more like Mikhail Parrish, or like worthy late career Kareem. I think there was anyway, but I digress. Tony Parker, 4 championships, as undoubtedly a top 3 player. He did win a Finals MVP. I think you could argue he was the second best player on 1 or 2 of those title teams. Yeah. Like playoff points, like he's 10th all time in playoff points. Like I don't know why does Tony Parker? He was my number 1 snub. Why should he not be ahead of Klay Thompson on the snub list? So
Tony Parker, for all the reasons you just said, is like one of my top 3 or 4 snubs. I mean, I think it's very close. If you were to say, I hear everything you're saying about Klay, but I think Tony Parker is a bigger snub for XYZ reason. Like, you know what? I'm not like going to say you're ridiculous for thinking that. Tony Parker he also should have been on this list for all the reasons that you just said. Absolutely. 100% should have been on this list.
Okay. Well, so you agree with me. I like when Yash agrees with me.
I'll direct traffic. Oz.
All right. So let me explain my theory of this list, which is that when I was a kid, I watched a lot of pro wrestling. And now that I have a son, he likes pro wrestling. And in pro wrestling, there's a concept called kayfabe. And kayfabe is the fiction of wrestling where the wrestlers have to treat it like it's real. You basically set a narrative and then you live the narrative every day. So if you see like the Undertaker in an airport, he's in character as the Undertaker at the airport. He's not he's not the real guy. He's still the Undertaker. And that's how they all live their lives. There's a fiction that's created that everyone wants to live out. And I think a lot of the creation of this list is the NBA creating their own version of kayfabe, their own version of this sort of narrative of what the history of the league has been. And I think the clearest indication of that is that basically everyone on the NBA 35 is on the NBA 50. Every single player on the NBA 50 made the NBA 75, which means the vast majority of the voters said, we've already established 50 dudes who are on this list. Let's pick the next 25 and just went with it. So what I think they're trying to do isn't necessarily to pick out the 25 greatest players per se. It's the 25 players who fit the narrative of who the greatest players are. And I think that's what led them to leave out the most egregious snub on the list. And honestly, I may go wash myself with steel wool after I say this, but the most egregious snub on the list, and it's not close, strike me down, is Dwight Howard.